I'm Xavier Tomsej. I'm a supply chain lead at USAID in the Global Health Bureau. Welcome to the most fun session of this conference. The format, we only have 40 minutes, so I'm going to sort of set the stage a little bit, and then we'll have a discussion with our panel, and hopefully we'll have some time for questions. Also, by the way, if you want to send your question through the Hoover app, please do so. So the first humanitarian delivery of medicines by drone, to my knowledge, was in 2013 in Haiti and Dominican Republic. There was a rapid expansion of use cases and use, and we are now in a stage of targeted investments to address roadblocks such as technology, airspace use, etc. But we are stuck in that niche stage. The market at large hasn't yet figured out the right mix of demand consolidation, technological innovation, and sustainable economic models to unlock the growth of the sector. People have latched on to the latter point, the sustainable price point, to explain why the industry hasn't taken off yet. They compare a drone with a truck. A drone, a truck, things that are not comparable. But in global health, these considerations of price are secondary. What matters instead is the opportunity cost of failing to treat patients at the last 60 miles or 100 kilometers of the supply chain, where there is no reliable routine use surface infrastructure to allow the provision of medical products. Where the road, the tunnels, the bridges stop, what do? You still have patients on the other side. We can't control an epidemic if we haven't reached the last 5% of infected patients. In the same way, in countries that face security instability, you can't prevent the next insurgency if you don't provide equitable services to all the population over the country. But how do we fund this new infrastructure? While the demand is obvious, though fragmented across sectors, education, health, retail, whatever, the supply side has not organized itself to meet it and compete with surface transportation, even where surface transportation has reached its capacity limits. As a result, governments are struggling with justifying unsustainable funding models. So, Judith, what perspective do you bring to the drone discussion today?
So, I don't know how many of you were in my previous presentation where we used the drones for inventory management in our DCs. We also use the drones for surveillance and security purposes at Plumbago DC, where the drones actually fly the perimeter fence, and if they do see movement, then they would follow that person. Mariano is a good example of that. He actually told me when they were busy installing the drones that he had a big fright because he heard this buzzing sound behind him, and the drones were actually following him all the way to the car. So those are the use cases that we're actually already busy with, and we're using them, and they've implemented, and we're running with them. The other proof of concepts that we're busy testing is in a 6-month test process now, that we use the drones in Denmark to supply urgent equipment and tools and spare parts to the offshore wind farm in Denmark. We also have the drones delivering urgent medical equipment in the DC in Canada to the hospital, directly from the warehouse to the hospital, using their helipad. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. What about you, Olivier? What's your perspective on this?
Thank you. Well, I work for an international not-for-profit NGO called Village Reach. And the mission of Village Reach is to partner with governments and local partners from the public and the private sector to transform healthcare and increase the access of healthcare, of quality healthcare. And one of the components is access to health products. And so for the last decade, almost decade, we've been exploring the use of cargo drone, also called logistic drone, to reach the unreachable, to reach the communities that are isolated, that are really hard to reach, and help government first evaluate the benefits of introducing, integrating drone as an additional mode of transportation into the health supply chain, and evaluate its impact, and then scale it, sustain it. Now, today there is a lot of data out there that are demonstrating the benefits of integrating drone into a supply chain from a supply chain performance standpoint, from even cost and health impact using proxy indicators. Today, the big question is not, is there value into integrated drone? It is about how can we make drone transport affordable, and so we can sustain their utilization and reach the impact that we are trying to reach with the governments.
But according to you, why are drones not more utilized?
So the value of drone is speed, reliability of transport, and predictability of transport. But at the end of the day, the economics have to make sense. And we now know, and we have the actual data from long-term operations, that it's only at scale that the economics start to make sense. But to get at scale, you got to increase its utilization, optimize the network, you got to have lots of customers using the transport, this additional mode of transportation. But it's too expensive right now because we're not at scale yet. We need to be at scale to decrease the price. So it's like a chicken and an egg. Also, people often refer to there's not the right regulatory environment that will allow beyond visual line of sight of drone. Well, this is changing very, very quickly. There is now, you can get waivers for small scale beyond visual line of sight, which allow you to start growing your reach. And that's all this optic of starting to scale, to reach that economy of scale and better pricing. It's happening. So let's not wait to look into what else do we need to figure out. Well, we need to figure out the business models, the operating models, the pricing structures. All those still need to be defined. Today, the demand is fragmented across multiple sectors: health, agriculture, environment, energy, mining, and so on and so on. And so, as a result, the development of drone logistics is happening in silo. Mm-hmm. While the drone is actually an agnostic solution. It doesn't matter what you put in the drone. It can be some seeds, it can be some drugs, it's agnostic. So we need to develop business model and operating model that would promote an optimization of the assets, of the network, and start increasing the return on investment, decreasing the unit cost, and so on. And last, the more the drone industry expands, the faster the demand grows, because growing the utilization of a drone network makes it more attractive for new customers because of economy of scale. We should really see drone logistics as the next Uber of the sky for cargo. So you have behind me, I believe, the traditional hub and spoke, where you have one central location and... Can you replay? Sorry. You have one central location and you have drone going back and forth from that central location. This is going to be hard to scale and to reach this economy of scale. You have to start thinking of a mesh network which allow you to have fleets of drones all around a region, and any customer can contact in order, I have my product that needs to be picked up at this place and be dropped at that place. And it's going to be the drone that is the closest to that location who's going to go deliver the service. So there's a mindset that needs to happen to reach that economy of scale, to decrease that unit price, that unit cost, and so on. So that's what we are working on now. That's what we have to start working on with the private sector as a provider, but also as a end user.
Your take on this, Judith?
So, some of why the drones aren't utilized as we would hope them to be, or as we would like them to be, I think, is the cost. The cost is high for the implementation. DSV we don't own the drones outright. We have a service provider that supplies us with the drones, and as the technology changes, we've got service levels agreements in place that would change the drones, because technology changes very quickly. I mean, a year can go by and you've got the Generation 4 drone coming in. So the cost is very high, and then also the development of infrastructure is needed. If you're thinking about a mesh network of hubs connecting a network of drones, you would need to have landing pads, people operating on the ground. You need to have the infrastructure in place for the drones to operate. And I think we're definitely a little bit behind on that, where even though we are testing it within our business, I don't think we're anywhere close to scaling that externally yet. We would need partnerships and contracts, and the demand is there, but is the capability there? Another thing that we need to look at is to create that scale and increase return on investment. We would need the drones to fly to and from locations and not return empty, because at the moment we are proofing it for the offshore wind farms, and as I said, the drone is delivering spare parts to the wind farm, but it's returning empty, right? And I mean, even though it's the carbon emissions that it's giving off is so low, we still don't get that full scale unless we return it full to the DC.
So there's an efficiency factor there.
Yeah.
So I'm staying with you. What can we do about some of these identified challenges? What existing commercial model can we emulate? And what is the future thinking on infrastructure? So,
like I said, the DSV model is business units operating sort of in silos, even though we are one DSV. I think where the drones fit in, and it was on the previous slide where it says nicely that where do the drones fit, there's air and sea, road, distribution, and then solutions all in one DSV umbrella. But what I would like to see, and this is my opinion, is that whole entire network or business units coming together and servicing a multi-sectoral demand across different business units and leveraging into that, you not returning a drone empty, and also across different business units.
Thank you, Judith. So it sounds, Olivier, like what you were saying is, or what Judith is saying is a reflection at the company level of what you are advocating for at the market level, right?
Yeah, indeed. So drone logistics is a market-led technology. And that means that its market is determined and influenced by the consumer. So we have to democratize, socialize drone logistics with industry leaders across the various sectors. We need to sit down with them and help them understand how drone logistics can make the business more effective, can help them save time, save money. We need to sit down with those industry leaders to help them identify how can drone logistics can add, for example, a service offering to the existing business, or can help them expand a market or access a new market, or even create new businesses. That's really what we need to start doing while the regulation is finishing its work, is shaping up. And today, a lot of the OEM or the operators of drones are working hands in hands with the regulators to develop that regulatory environment that will allow them to scale, but not enough work is being done across the various sectors to work together to develop the business model that will allow that scalability and allow to decrease the unit cost and so on.
So what makes you hopeful, or if anything?
Well, I think from my side, I'm really hopeful because for the last 6 months, since Village Reach had been really generating the hard data around how much does it truly cost to operate a drone transport network at some level of scale for a sustained period of time, we are now understanding the cost driver from the initial cost, the fixed cost, the variable cost, the semi-variable cost, and so on, of operating around, for example, in DRC, in Congo, DR Congo, 37,000 square kilometers surface, and we have a fleet of drones that's been operating for 2.5 years. So we actually have a pretty good understanding of what cost can we share across industries and how can we make it more cost effective. And that is being now, that allows us now to advocate with governments and the private sector across those different industries. And we are now feeling the interest from big logistic firms like DSV and others, as well as local logistic firms, from small, national or international, who are starting to realize, like, wait a second, this is not just for health. This can help me save time, make money, and my client can be in the mining industry, the healthcare industry, and I can utilize a pricing structure where you'll have a bigger margin, for example, for the mining clients, and you can subsidize for less profitable sector like the public health sector. So all those are starting to pop up in their mind, and that's what makes me hopeful.
Great. What about you, Judith?
So what makes me hopeful is the fact that it's definitely more sustainable. We did a little bit of a calculation just to find out, just to quantify how much CO2 emissions it actually takes us to deliver those spare parts from Denmark to the wind farm, and it's 6,500 kilograms of CO2 emissions versus the drone 14 kilograms of CO2 emissions, which is a lot more sustainable way to deliver items, and it's cost effective because from the DC to the port or to the harbor, from the harbor to the wind farm and then back again, you cut out a lot of waste. So I'm very hopeful for the fact that we are definitely moving into the sustainable way of doing things. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thanks. For me, it's there's a silver lining from the pandemic, where the matter of equity and access was obvious. So I think the drones will be able to address that equity access problem. anyone, on a geographic basis at least, can be served with health products and services through drones if we respect that principle. So thank you very much. We have plenty of time for questions.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have questions through Uwe, but if people have questions, please go ahead. Oh, we do? Okay. We have two, but maybe we can start. Any question in the audience? And we can put the resources slide, which is the next one. Thank you. Okay, let me try.
There's a question right here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, hi. Sorry.
Okay, I hear you talking about the drone technologies. What regulations do you face in Africa? And there is certainly serious regulations that we have service.
Yeah, so there's definitely some regulation and red tape that prohibits us from flying drones anywhere, especially over places where people live, residential areas and airspace, which is a big problem. And our DC is situated right next to the airport, so it's definitely a no-go from our Cape Town branch. It is something that our Global Innovation Lab is looking into, and we've got a dedicated drone expert that sits in Denmark that looks at global use cases and POCs, and he also looks at the regulatory requirements and governance with regards to that. I know it's something that is only now starting to be touched on, and trust me, the infrastructure is not nearly there to roll it out anytime soon. But I'm glad that we are starting these conversations and we're thinking about it, because I think it can definitely benefit us in the future. I don't know if you guys have seen NEOM is, you can go onto YouTube and just watch this 2-minute video. NEOM is busy building a 700-kilometer piece of straight line, they call it the line, in Saudi, where the drones will be doing deliveries in that space to everyone that lives in that line, basically. The line will be finished in 2025, if I'm not mistaken, and that's actually where I saw and where my eyes opened to, wow, you know, we are definitely moving into a direction where this is going to become a part of our lives. So I think there needs to be a lot more attention and focus put onto how do we overcome the barrier of regulation within our country. But I would like to just first see the lights stay on.
Absolutely.
Yes.
If I can add, so Village Reach has been in the space for 8 years. We have implemented or helped implement 5 different drone programs. 3 of them are still occurring in 5 different countries, starting 7-8 years ago. And it's literally a journey that you have to take on with the regulatory environment, with the civil aviation, with lots of authorities needs to be involved. And it's really about step by step and defining a roadmap with them that makes them at ease, confident, comfortable with. And progressively, you start, in an area very small, just to see how it works. Just like most of them haven't seen in person. So there's a lot of sensitization to do, education to do. And then progressively, you go a little bigger and bigger in terms of geography. You develop with them the route. There is routes that are pre-approved. Okay, it's not like you can fly anywhere. The roads that are pre-approved, that you pre-approve with them. And so it's an investment, but it's necessary. And the chance is in Africa, the civil aviation are willing to take some risk. and are willing to learn from what's happening in Europe, in the US, in Australia, and so on, and take that and scale it in their country. So we had never had any problem to have authorization of flying in 5 countries. And now we're providing technical assistance to other partners who want to do the same thing in their country. And we have developed frameworks that we refine over the years with regulators that again makes them confident that it's the right approach to do, progressive approach.
So not speaking on behalf of the USG, I would caution against. There are closer models, such as Malawi, that may be better fitted and faster to
yes.
emulate for Africa. We have another question there.
Okay, I'm John from Ghana, and in Ghana we have about 6 mini airports with zipline drones, and it's been ongoing for some time. But I just want your take on something. Recently we've observed something. I've done a paper which has been sent out under review. What we observed is that our drone program was intended for emergency logistics, but given governmental approvals that the normal, regular logistics go through, over time what we've observed is that the emergency logistics is gradually turning into a regular logistics because health professionals see it as a far much more quicker way. Because if I order drugs right now to a health facility in a remote area, within 30 minutes, I get my drugs in, it drops in. And we've also observed that because of that, they are not keeping too much on their shelves. Just in time, as and when they need it, they bring it in. Now, my question is this. How do you, and it's becoming a costly thing for the government. And recently the minister commented on that people are kind of abusing it because it's become more efficient, more reliable, and a much more dependable way to go when it comes to logistics. What do you see in the future in this area? Because it gets costly at a point too. Thank you.
Now, I remember the article coming out was the minister was criticizing that a lot of resources are being used for using those drones, and then there was lack of resource for other things. And the way we address that is by really making sure that the governments understand that it's just an additional mode of transportation. And so when we get approached like we want to use drone to improve our health supply chain, the first thing we do is like, let's look at your traditional supply chain performance indicators. Let's understand where does it not work, and what's the root cause of why you have such a low performance in that region, for example. Is that truly a transportation problem? Because at the end of the day, the drone is only a mean of transportation. And with that exercise, we're able to identify where drone can add value to the existing supply chain. You don't want to change something that is working, that is reaching the level of performance that you feel comfortable. You want to address where the supply chain breaks down. And that's why we don't use drone for covering all the health facility in a region. We only use drone to transport, pick up, and deliver product to the hardest to reach, where the supply chain that use traditional mode of transportation is failing. And vaccine, family planning, and then all beyond health, if it's hard to reach for EPI, for the immunology, EPI, so the immunization team, it's going to be hard also for nutrition. It's going to be hard also for malaria, and so on, or essential medicine. It's also going to be the same thing for other players in the industry who needs to bring commodities to that hardest to reach location. So it's not a solution to any problem, it's a transportation solution, and it's not going to replace truck, motorcycle, and in some cases where it fits. The principle is, and I like to say it, it's fit for purpose mode of transportation. It's about using a fit for purpose mode of transportation in your supply chain. Drone is just one mode of transportation among other.
And I think there must be ways to disincentivize the abuse of the drone in that system. You can calibrate the balance between drone use and surface transportation by just introducing some incentives to go the other way, to go back, you know. But, and here I have to say my statement. I'm not speaking on behalf of the US government, but this represents my views only. Competition, and this is competition. Competition is good for the patient because it forces the existing system to up their game. And the existing system needs to up their game. So let's welcome competition. Let's moderate the cost, of course, but let's keep an eye on the patient. We have a question there.
I'm just really very interested in the air traffic control around this. I'm a pilot and I understand all the restrictions inside of flying any type of aircraft. So, you know, when you advise governments on how to effectively use drones and not cause more risk, you know, what are the parameters within which you think is safe for drones to fly? And let's say you eventually start having thousands of drones channeling through certain corridors. What kind of rules do you apply? Do you keep left? Do you keep right? What's your upper and your lower, you know, altitude limits? I just want to know: have you already worked through those problems, and how do you advise on that?
Yeah. So the segregation of the airspace is a very complex problem, and now we advise by forcing the manufacturer to make sure they use the right technology, and so air traffic control as well as regular aircraft can see the drone and vice versa. So that's kind of like one of the area where a lot of work is being done. The other one is, you know, the avoid systems where they'll sense something on the route, and the drone will act in a certain way. But that system is being developed either by OEM themselves or by just companies that are just specialized on that. And so we advise the regulator to work with those industries and impose those equipment, for example, to those OEM. But it's very, very complex. But we have in Africa, you know, there is a lot of region where it's not overly populated. And so this is where, in Malawi, for example, we work with the civil aviation in Malawi where there is a drone corridor. And that's where we test those kind of technology. That's where we demonstrate the efficiency of that technology and how we address risk. It's all about addressing the risk. And actually, EASA is actually a risk-based regulation they are developing. While in the US, it's still the traditional way where they take the traditional aircraft regulation and they just try to apply that to drone. Two different approach. And in Africa, they refer to the EASA where they look at what are the risks and how do you address risk.
And you'll never get to zero risk.
No.
But the same way, if you're a pedestrian in Nairobi, you incur some risks. So it's just balance. But okay, René.
Thanks, Xavier. So speed and cost are usually the two trade-offs that we play around with in logistics anyway. And so maybe for Judith and a bit for Xavier, you know, Xavier, you and I ran a pilot together in Malawi, and, you know, we decided that the cost was too great to bear. But in retrospect, I wonder if we have to think of trade-offs in there and start thinking about, does one mode offset another, and we look at what is the benefit of that speed. And so I'm wondering, Judith, would your clients be willing to pay a slightly higher cost in one place that may offset a lower cost somewhere else? And Xavier, as a donor, would someone like the US government consider paying more cost for greater speed? Because those are really going to be the trade-offs in the end of the day. I don't think we're going to drive a cost point down in a drone environment, even as payloads increase, to a place where it's going to be the same as road traffic.
Yeah. Yeah, so definitely our client, the wind farm is our client. They definitely pay for the drone delivery of the urgent equipment. It's usually so urgent that it's causing like a breakdown, and it's not generating any power to that extent where they're losing money every single minute that that thing is down. So definitely it outweighs the cost of the delivery for the speed of the delivery. So it's very true.
And in terms of the government calculations, it's more cost, maybe not for more speed, but more cost for more success. And like I said, there's the equity part. There is the fact that you can't control an epidemic if you don't go far enough. So you have to extend the boundaries of your supply chain. There is the whole aspects of de-risking. There are some things that you can't just risk having, so you have to pay extra to get it done. I talked about insurgency. That's a bit of an extreme example, but you know what I mean. So these trade-offs, okay, the US government, I don't know. We'll talk about it.
But you're still thinking monosectorial. Imagine, I'm going to use purely an example that doesn't exist yet, but let's say DSV. DSV is, for example, in Mozambique. And they are one of the primary logistic firms that help governments and so on. Well, what about if they add that service, that drone transport service, to all the whole pool of customers that they are already serving?
Schools.
Yeah,
whatever.
Across the
Retail
sectors.
shops.
And now use those high margin to subsidize for the public health. We're thinking scale. We're thinking we have to go to that scale. Even in Mozambique right now, in Malawi, we're competitive with motorcycle.
I want to jump to the last question. Yeah.
How much do you think you are willing to pay to... Is $50 too much to save a life? $50? Round trip? And we're not even at scale. But to be true, Malawi and Mozambique, it's pretty cheap there. Congo, DR Congo, very expensive country, very expensive to travel and so on. So the cost is higher. Okay, so it's very context specific as well. In some regions, it will be easy to start hitting to be competitive with traditional mode of transportation, and you add the speed, you add the predictability, and so on. In other countries, it'll take a little more time, but we will get there at scale.
Sir.
Thank you. Just want to make 2 comments on 2 topics. I'll be fast. In Mozambique, for instance, when we talk about licensing for all this process, it's really an educational process to the government and to institutions. For instance, we didn't mention about the Ministry of Defense, which also they need to approve this whole operation. The second point is that about the altitude that one of the participants asked. So in one of the operations in Mozambique, by the way, I work for Village Reach. So in one of our operations in Mozambique, in Vilanculos, it's a tourist place. So there are lots of helicopters and other flights. So they had to actually change the altitude that they've been flying to accommodate the operation of drones. Over.
Thank you very much. We had time. There were 2 questions on the app. We will address them offline, but I want to thank the panelists, Judith and Olivier, and thank you for all your interesting questions and your attention.
Thank you. Victor?
Good job. Oh, I think.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, that's
I think
right. That's
you
right.
did it.